All right, good afternoon and welcome to the main part of the National Ombud Expo. I hope you all had a good lunch, and as you know, Botswana lunch is not a particularly difficult one after you have eaten it. So I'm expecting that we wouldn't have too many people dozing off when we proceed. But thank you so much for the participation this morning. I think we all feel that we had an awesome time, as they describe it. We plan to do two main things this afternoon. I'm waiting for the hard copy of the program. If you have not been able to download, there is a scan, as I said, on your tag that you scan to get access to the composite program for the 3 days. But hard copies are coming in now. We expect in the next 30 minutes they should be here and we can also distribute them. But essentially for this afternoon, we have two main things that we want to achieve. The first part of it is an important part of what we set out to do when we started to conceive of this idea. And it was an idea which essentially was driven by the Office of the Ombudsman of Botswana. One of the things we decided when the expo was being conceived was that we would use it as a particular event to pay tribute and honor those who contribute to our institution. And the reason why we do that is that we see a lot of people make so much sacrifice as ombudsmen. Some of them put their life, essentially, actually in danger to be able to deliver their role. And once they leave office, that's the end of the story. People never remember them. People never talked about them again. And we had been doing some work on this, and we really thought, yes, one of the things we would always do, every time we do the expo, we will try to celebrate those who have contributed to one aspect of our institution in one way or another. In the last expo, we did use it to celebrate three key individuals that had contributed. The first female ombudswoman in Africa. We also had celebrated the first military ombuds in Africa, and of course we also celebrated one of the leading figures in Latin America and the Caribbean. The other key things we did at the last expo, we celebrated all those women who have led our institution over the last 200 years. And if you go into the expo website, it will lead you on to a dedicated site that we have created for all female heads of this institution. We try to update it from time to time, and I think some of the newer ombudswomen and ombudspersons we haven't quite uploaded. So if you go into it and you find out that of anyone that is not there, please feel free to write to the IOE secretary mail and give us that information. But the whole idea is that all the female who have made such significant contribution, we want to have a dedicated place where they are always celebrated. Quite a number of you who are here are already on that dedicated website. You enter it, Miss Bakwena is there, and I see Aline is there. I think Madam Military Ombudsman is there. Madam Sekoni is on that site. Madam Arujo is on the site. So and the idea is that any female leader who has been in this institution, we will capture her image and keep it there permanently for anyone who wants to, appreciate the role that women have done. So for this expo, we then decided to pick up on the pioneers. And we knew clearly that that would be a much more difficult thing to do. The idea really was we wanted to pick the first person that the first incumbent of every office in all ombudsman offices around the world. Incidentally, that is not information you can find on the website. If you go on the website and you type the image of female ombudsman, the internet will bring up images of women. But if you go on the internet and you type pioneers, ombudsman, you will not get anything. So it was a much more difficult thing to do. And what we have been doing over the last 1.5 years was writing to countries and asking them to give us the information. I regret to report to you, and I personally had predicted that the response has not been as good as we expected. Many offices just did not respond to us. And we did, with the support of the Office of the Ombudsman, continue to send messages, and many never just reported. Part of the reason is, and I hope that this will provide you all an opportunity to address it, is that many offices don't even keep records of their pioneers. They don't know who was the first person. And if you go to most offices, they can't tell you who actually was the first person who did the work to make this of the institution possible. And those of us who have been pioneers, and Aline Brock is here, they know the hard work that it takes when you set up an institution from afresh. It's a difficult job. And if you imagine those who were in the 70s and in the 60s, that was a time when nobody even had an idea of what we were talking about. For you who might be interested, a survey was done in the United Kingdom, I think around the 1980s. And they had gone around to ask people, who do you think an ombudsman is? It would interest you. Quite a lot of people thought an ombudsman is the name of a masquerade. So it tells you how much, even in developed world, people know very little. And many of these pioneers had to take up this job in that kind of situation. They had no idea. They didn't know what it was all about. Some of them read here and there. And many of them had no resources, very limited resources, to start their offices. And this is why we felt it was really, really useful. But unfortunately, we have not been able to capture them as much as we do. So we would have wished, beg your pardon. And what we are going to show you, just a handful of those that we managed to get, and it's still open. The whole idea is that, again, like the women dedicated site, we will have a dedicated site as part of the IOE for all pioneers. Younger people might also want to do research on that. So after this event, please do send us information that you have, data about the pioneer, the first incumbent in your office. And we want the image, and we want a short write-up on them and when they were in authority. There are actually also a few. We are fortunate that I think we probably have 3 or so pioneers here, who are around. And we're also fortunate to have someone who will be able to speak about what we estimate, who we estimate is the oldest surviving pioneer in the world. It's the former ombudsman of Lesotho, who is 99 years and will be 100 years, I think, in a few months from now. And the ombudsman of Lesotho will be speaking about that later on. So we plan to do that very quickly, and once we have done that, we will now formally start the exhibition. And the ombudsman and Ms. Arujo will, with a few staff officials, will go and cut the ribbon. We will stay here and we'll be able to follow them on video. And once they have cut the ribbon and they have gone in, we can then, in batches, try and go and see the exhibition. So that's essentially the plan for the afternoon. I recall that I didn't finish the introduction earlier in the afternoon, and I'm just wondering if there anyone who really think I feel I'm so important that people need to know that I'm here. Anyone feel that and I guess every one of us, feel fit into that. But you might just be getting this spiritual conviction that, no, people should not come to Botswana and not know that I was also here as well. So if you can just wave, or if during the course of the discussion that will follow, you can also use that opportunity to introduce yourself and to tell us who you are. So before we start to show the slide of the few pioneers that we managed to get, very disappointing, I must say, I think I want to invite the Ombudsman. This was, in many ways, his initiative. I think we want to say a few words before we proceed. Ombudsman of Botswana.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the office, they normally refer to me as the fifth ombudsman, precisely to just drum it in my head that I'm not the pioneer ombudsman. When you look at the history of ombudsmanship in Botswana, I think it's something that the government has been somewhat, for close to 4 decades before today, were a bit uncomfortable with. I understand after reading an article by one writer, a fellow called, I don't know whether it's Manga or Manga. Those who know Setswana will know what the word Manga means. Manga Ombud says that the government, around 1974, toyed around with the idea of an ombudsman. A necessary nuisance, then they discarded it. It popped up again around mid-80s when there was quite a lot of movement and discussion around the issue of ombudsman, and eventually appointed the first ombudsman in 1997, one Letebe Maine. And it seems like over the course of his tenure, he had not a difficult relationship with the government, but not particularly an easy one as well. Because when you look at the casework that he did, some of it caused a bit of discomfiture with the government. Most of you, Botswana, would remember the case of the aeroplanes, where the ombudsman had determined that one particular head of state had inappropriately continued to fly military aircraft. But the government, the president said no, this was not out of order. And I think that was one of the points that created a measure of friction. I recently attended a book launch by the younger brother to the late Letebe Maine. And his view has always been that following Maine's retirement as ombudsman, he seemed to have somehow been ostracized. He returned to his private practice, but he realized that he was not getting as much work as he should have, as he had previously. And apparently because there was movement to sort of deny him opportunity to have a fully functional and profitable law firm, leading to a point where he almost went bankrupt, became very despondent, and unfortunately took his life. But that is the view of a brother. I'm not saying that is the case. Why am I saying this? I'm just saying this because one gets a feeling that and I haven't got that feeling yet, that when you're ombudsman, you get into a somewhat fractious relationship with government. You get into difficult circumstances with heads of ministries, administrative heads of ministries. I was recently driven to a point where I had to issue a subpoena to a head of one ministry who did not comply. And I took the next logical step, which was to then cause her to be summoned by the station commander of Central Police Station Gaborone, which is within our area of operation. And it was only under the pressure of us opening a docket that the particular permanent secretary became amenable to discussing the matter at hand. And they did come to our office and we discussed the particular matter. But lo and behold, they have now absconded again, despite the timelines that we had agreed that we'll resolve this matter in this way. All I'm trying to say is that as you discharge your functions as ombudsman, especially of the nature of the General Public Service Ombudsman, you find that there is a measure of resentment within the administration, particularly the administrative officers, but also that you are viewed with a measure of discomfiture even by politicians. Because as things go, in discharge of functions, you are likely to show up where government has gone wrong. And therefore, you find that until any particular country gets it around their mind that the ombudsman is a nuisance, but a necessary nuisance, you find that a lot of the pioneers operated under hostile environments. And when we set up this particular expo, my view was that we need to explore and see how each and every pioneer would have survived in the environment that they operated within. And a non-scientific, non-empirical view of many of the circumstances, one gets a feeling that they were looked at with a measure of disdain at the least, and maybe even hostility by the counterparts in government. I mean, I've gotten the feeling that as I'm engaged with accounting officers in government, that they resent the issue of oversight because they don't want to be, if I were to say, supervised by another appointee of government. Maybe it's just my feeling, but you sense that there is annoyance, there's frustration, there's anger when you ask for them to deal with matters put before you. And that attitude then breeds a lot of disengagement between the ombudsman and other government officers. And hence, the thinking was that maybe the pioneers before us would have had it tougher than the latter incumbents. And therefore, we wanted to showcase, and we had asked for information on pioneers on the Ombud services in various countries. And we today are going to then showcase the examples that have been provided. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just again, now that the Ombudsman mentioned, there is no doubt that those who came before us had very difficult times. There is no doubt. And we do have, done some studies on that, and we have evidence of how hard and difficult it was. As I said earlier on, the Ombudsman institution has, and not just Ombudsman, oversight generally, we now have more understanding of what they are meant to do. We are focusing on ombudsmen or ombuds-related institutions, but indeed most oversight institutions face similar problem. In fact, it's worse for those ones that are strictly anti-corruption institutions. We have evidence of human rights ombudsmen who have been assassinated in places like Latin America. So it is a difficult job, in that sense. And it's for that reason that, as the Ombudsman has mentioned, we truly deserve to pay tribute to those who have come before us. There's that proverb that the Ombudsman put in his speech, that we are what we are because of all those who went before us. One other interesting thing I would like to talk about is the fact that, again, when you look at the way it has evolved, today you come into, set up like this, you have 60%, 50% women. This institution was predominantly, a male institution some 30 years ago. And in fact, they were not just male, they all used to be elderly male. So the institution has progressed to a large extent. It took Africa about almost 35 years to appoint the first female ombudsperson from when the first ombudsman was appointed. And that's true of the rest of the world. So again, I want to urge, please, when you go back to the office, send us information if you are not here. We have very few slides, very, very few. And we really, at some point, were so disappointed that we thought maybe we really shouldn't do this. But we knew offices had put in a lot of effort, and we still wanted to show. So I'm going to ask, can you show the slide now, of, I think, about 30-odd ombudsmen that we were able to get out of, hundreds that we know exist at the moment. Yes. as we said, we had thought that it would be something that we will run continuously for the rest of the day, but indeed, I hope that you do appreciate, and our pioneers, wherever they are, also appreciate how much we recognize the contribution they made. Quite a few of them are still around, and some are still quite young. And as I said earlier on, we have the privilege of having at least two here, Zetu and Madam Aline Brock. I wonder if they're in the room. You want to recognize yourself? I think that's Zetu, who is if I am right, Zetu is probably the first university ombudsman in sub-Saharan Africa. You know, are not aware of anyone who was appointed before her. So she holds that eminent position of being the first university ombuds in our continent. Thank you, Madam Zetu. And Aline Brock is the former and pioneer ombudsman of Bermuda. And also we appreciate very much that you took the trouble to come here on her. You know, she's retired, but she decided to pay herself to come here. We really appreciate and thank you. We also wanted to focus on three particular individuals, you know, for obvious reasons, and the Ombudsman has talked about them. The first is obviously Letebe Maine, who, you know, I knew very personally, was a good friend, but had this, you know, unfortunate. And really, I must say that the life of Letebe influenced many of what, you know, came to be part of my own focus on looking at ombudsmen and how they prepare for their retirement. Because it became so obvious that you hold this eminent position, sometimes you are very well paid, you know, sometimes not fantastically, but you take a whole lot of risk, you fight with people, you know, who are in authority, and then your term ends. But people never forget the way you came after them. And it tends to chase you on as you go on. And for that reason, we've taken quite some interest in encouraging ombudsmen to also never forget that there will be a time of retirement, and they need to begin to make plans for what happened during that time. So we wanted to focus late Letebe Maine, you know, who was the first ombudsman of Botswana. And of course, for many of you, you do not know the first African. The first African, Tanzania, is here. You know Tanzania was the first institution in the continent, and Mr. Magwenya was the first ombudsman. And they're going to show this slide. And of course, as I said, the third individual we wanted to focus on, and I will invite the Ombudsman of Lesotho, is Mr. Nsaba. Mr. Nsaba is believed to be the oldest surviving pioneer in the world at the moment. And that makes him, he's 99 years, and I was privileged to have met him some months ago. I had seen him, the last time I saw him was about 35 years ago, and he was still able to remember me. So it was really amazing. He will be 100 years in a few months, and we just thought we should also recognize him. So could you show the slide of these three key individuals? You know, Mr. Maine, yeah, that's Letebe Maine was, and that's the late gentleman that Ombudsman Botswana was talking about. He was the first ombudsman here, and of course, because they're hosting, we thought really we should. It was a fine. And at some point, he was the president of the African Ombudsman Association. I think that was probably the last position he held before he demitted office. And the second in the slide is Mr. Mangweng. The next one. This is the face of the first African ombudsman. He was appointed 1967, I think. That law was passed in 66, and I think he was appointed in 1967. If you read some of the things he wrote about his experience, you would appreciate how hard it was in those days. But one of the striking things was also that Mr. Mngwenya did in many ways set the tone for many of the things that most of us now do today, particularly what has become the informal approach of the ombudsman. He was particularly, instrumental in understanding that to deal with people in a less developed environment where there were a lot of people who were not necessarily educated, the ombudsman needed a more hands-on, informal approach. And he went around and would travel regularly in trying to, conduct the work. So I don't know at some point if Tanzania wants to say anything, but this is the face. We tried to look for the first ombudsman who was appointed in Sweden, but we simply couldn't find the record of him. And then the third individual that we want to focus specifically is Mr. Nsaba. Mr. Nsaba is the oldest ombudsman, and I just thought, as a tribute to him, we would ask Madam Ombudsman of Lesotho, you want to say a few words about him?
Dumelang bomme le bontate. As an officer, I would like to salute the Ombudsman of Botswana, Advocate Tro Yakhosi, Ombudsman of Angola, and the President of IOMA, Honorable Antonia Araujo, Honorable Joseph Whitel, the President of the Network of African Human Rights Institutions and Commissioner of Human Rights, the Secretary General of IOMA, the Senior Advisor on behalf of the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat. Professor Anyeli, we observe you as well. Fellow ombudsmen and public protectors here present, heads of oversight institutions, and all officers, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol as established at the beginning of this ceremony is observed. There is a saying that we all stand tall, or when we stand tall, we actually stand on the shoulders of those who actually came before us. Some of us have found it fairly easy, while some have found to work in extremely very difficult conditions, given the environments that we work in. But these pioneers are really trailblazers who set up our offices to make our work a lot easy. I'm going to speak. I know I was told to do a very brief one I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to contain that in a few minutes, but I'll try my best. Honorable Mohali Henry Ntaba, as Professor Ayeni has indicated, is a retired ombudsman. He was born on the 3rd of March 1925 in the district of Mokgotlong, Lesotho. As was said, he's still very much alive, healthy and of sound mind at an enviable age of 99 years. Now, the Constitution of Lesotho was actually enacted in 1993, which also coincided with the establishment of the Office of the Ombudsman in Lesotho. His term of employment started on the 18th day of October 1993 and was to end in October of 1997. It was, however, extended for a further period of 4 years, and he retired in 2002. Now, academically, he obtained his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Fort Hare in the then Union of South Africa in 1946. He subsequently proceeded to the University of South Africa, where he was awarded his BA Honours degree in 1951. He did his postgraduate degrees majoring in development studies at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom before going on to mold African youth in responsible and successful adults in various educational institutions where he served in both the Republic of South Africa and the Kingdom of Lesotho between the years 1947 and 1961. With his now deceased wife, they were blessed with 5 children. And during the colonial days of Basotholand, he joined the civil service and held high-profile public positions in government, which inter alia included serving as Assistant Secretary in the office of the then resident commissioner, and later in the Constitutional Commission between 1962 and 1964. He went on to become the very first permanent secretary of the newly independent Kingdom of Lesotho and headed the Ministry of Works. He also administered many parastatal organizations and supervised a number of consultancy projects. His outstanding life achievements were exemplified by, amongst others, the historic landmark in the constitutional development of the kingdom, which has been the establishment, development, and operationalization of the Ombudsman's Act, number 9 of 1996. Ndate Mohale designed, he built from scratch, and developed the structures and operations of the Office of the Ombudsman, Lesotho. His shaping of the principles and policy in consonance with the traditional philosophy of ombudsmanship has found an indelible expression in the Act and its accompanying rules, together with the strategies that he developed. In recognizing this exemplary character of this great man, many citizens throughout the country shall remember him for his exposition of the concept of ombudsmanship during the public awareness campaigns, which he relentlessly spearheaded and maintained during his incumbency. He traveled all over the country, including very remote corners where no other public official had ever set foot, on official duties, addressing the public from all walks of life, including villagers, rural authorities, heads of government departments and senior government officials, various institutions, parliamentarians, the media, and civil society groups. His awareness campaigns were like no other. We really wanted for all Basotho to appreciate the role and mandate of the Ombudsman as a parliamentary watchdog intended to strengthen democracy and as an oversight body that ensures good governance practices are upheld and that there's general observance of the rule of law. Most importantly, he raised awareness on the Ombud's mandate and how complaints could be lodged. He undertook a lot of advocacy work raising awareness as part of his ongoing publicity campaign. He also raised a lot of awareness on the rights of indigenous communities who live in territories that are earmarked for large infrastructure development projects, which lead normally to inevitable friction with government, and in particular, the Lesotho Highlands Development Authority. We do now have a second phase of it, which the current Ombudsman is very involved in ensuring that the rights of indigenous communities are really protected. He visited the Mohali Dam construction site and made progress in this regard. And in the very first year at the helm, he received 120 written complaints and dealt with a variety of verbal complaints and queries telephonically. Ndaden Tshaba headed the office and led it into the world. He had it counted amongst the voting members of the International Ombudsman Institute and the African Ombudsman and Mediation Association. Hence, following his retirement, the then president of IOMA, who was the Honorable Ombudsman Maine, may his soul rest in eternal peace, wrote to Ndaden Tshaba and had this to say, and I quote, "It is with some sadness that I received your letter dated the 1st of March 2002, announcing your retirement. You have been a steadfast and providing light to our younger ombudsmen in the region. Your wise counsel, as well as your humility, will be missed by all the lonely world of being an ombudsman. The above outstanding, you certainly deserve a rest. Phomola ka kgotso motaung." Close quote. So when he started the office, he only had his personal secretary, the office assistant, and a chauffeur, and operated in that manner for the initial period of 9 months. And at the time, when he retired in 2002, he left the Ombuds office with a strong and capable 24 workforce comprising of 6 investigators and other support staff, and with a track record of having investigated and completed 1,384 public complaints. He also introduced and implemented a complaints management system and provided preliminary training to staff on its use. Ndaden Tshaba's contributions to the Ombudsman fraternity is recognizable and acknowledged not only within the kingdom's boundaries, but also externally, as evidenced by the then Botswana's Ombudsman's words. The Ombudsman of Namibia, also wrote to him and had this to say, and I quote, "On behalf of the Namibian Ombudsman, Advocate Bians Gawanas, who was the executive secretary in the Namibian Ombudsman structure," he said, "I'm sure that you retire with a sense of accomplishment, having established your office from scratch and having built effective relations with other ombudsman offices such as ours. I'm really honored to have known and worked with you, and I trust that you will keep the flames of ombudsmanship burning long after your retirement. Be rest assured that I will offer my continued cooperation and assistance to your executive secretary, whom I have known as a capable staff member of your office. May I, on behalf of the Ombudsman of Namibia, as well as in my capacity as Executive Secretary, wish you and your family only the best for the future and a well-deserved rest." He indeed is a trailblazer, and he managed to forge a lot of relationships with other ombudspersons in the region and internationally during his tenure of office. He also spent a lot of time visiting offices, amongst others, the Investigator General in Lusaka, Zambia, and spent time in consultations and observation in the office of Justice Mrs. Florence Mumba and the likes of Amnesty International in connection with human rights violations that arose from challenges within the security agencies. So this is our trailblazer, the pioneer of Lesotho, and we thank him for all that he has done for the Basotho nation and the work that he continued to do regionally and internationally with his counterparts. I thank you. Kgotso pula nala.
Thank you, Madam Ombudsman. We do also extend our best wishes, and we continue to wish Mr. Ansaba long life. I wonder if there is anyone who also wants to say anything about anyone, any pioneer that you feel you know. But of course, if you want to know what it feels like to be a pioneer, there are 2 live cases here. Talk to Eileen, she will tell you what it sounds like and what they had to go through, as well as to Madam Zetu. That's essentially is taking us to the end of this and of what we want to do. What we will do, of course, is we will continue to play the slide, once, we even when we wind up this event. And as I said, we are collecting the copies, the hard copies of the program, and it will be put in strategic places where you can pick them up. We have a few copies. I don't think they're enough, but once the rest come, we will put everything in strategic places for all of us. There are a couple of announcements that we need to make in terms of how we proceed from today. The way we had designed it is that we will not have any formal presentations today. But tomorrow, we start with those. And the plan is that for every period, there will be three discussion groups. It will be this room. There's a room which is opposite the accreditation room, and the room that is just behind on the other side of this hall. They will all be labeled, and we will label them as the number for the session as well as the theme for those sessions. So for tomorrow, we expect to have discussions around, an opening discussion around oversight institutions, just seeing the range of them around the world. We would also have a discussion around anti-corruption integrity issues. We would then also have a dedicated session on Botswana experience. Interestingly, Botswana is a relatively small country, but has one of the very exciting, experience of oversight institutions. It got a wide range, probably far too many for a small country, but we have the privilege in this program of being able to get quite a few of them coming together and being able to share with you the different things that they do and with one another. We also think it provides an opportunity for them to build up their collaboration. So those will be the 3 main things we do in the morning between 10 and 1 o'clock. We go for lunch at 1 o'clock, and then we come back at 2:30 to then have another 3 sessions. The 3 sessions, again, run in parallel, one in this room, one in that room, and the other in that other room. Will cover the challenges of standards and effectiveness, how ombudsmen need to, and oversight institutions try to navigate those challenges. We will have a dedicated session, and this is something that we feel particularly proud of, which is run by the International Ombuds Association, dedicated to organizational ombuds. we feel that there is a major need to focus attention on those range of institutions that you now find in not only in some educational institutions, but in corporate organizations as well as international institutions and NGOs. So this session will be run by the International Ombuds Association on the role and impact of organizational ombuds. And we expect quite a number of our colleagues in America, Switzerland, and a few other places to join us in that hybrid discussion. And then the sixth session is what we call good practices in oversight operations. So those will be what we have in the afternoon. As we said, it's your choice which one you want to attend. And on Thursday, of course, we will have another series of that before we finally close. We don't expect to be assembling like this again. So when we come in the morning, people essentially will move into their different, all the rooms will be labeled, and you can simply move into those rooms. Sessions start, they will run for 3 hours, 10 to 1 o'clock, and then in the afternoon from 2:30 to 5:30. The exhibition runs continuously. They start 9 o'clock, and they are open 9 o'clock, and they close at 6 o'clock. So you can come in, and you can go into the exhibition, look at what you want to look at, do any interaction you want, and then you can come into the session, and you have any experience. I don't know if there's any other announcement, but one final announcement is that the SADC countries, the institutions in SADC, are planning to, there's a suggestion, it's not a plan, there's a suggestion that those who come from the SADC country should probably have an informal lunch together. And I think it's being organized by the South African Human Rights Commission, and we will give you more details of where that will happen. But please be aware that those who come from SADC, all the institutions, the human rights ombudsman, their suggestion is that you guys can come together and just have some informal discussion. We will discuss with the organizers on how that will happen. But South Africa, we will liaise with them on that. I think that really will conclude this session. And once it concludes, what we will now do is invite the Ombudsman to lead Madame Marusho. I think Madame Marusho is cutting the ribbon, and your officials, as well as some of our senior colleagues who are here from the Commonwealth, as well as the President of Pleanary, to go and open the exhibition formally. There's going to be a video of that, so we all don't have to go out with them. Once they finish and they go in, we can then, organize ourselves on how we want to go. I don't know if there is anyone who has questions or any clarification that you want us to deal with. Hey, is that okay, Mr. Ombud? It's fine, sir. Okay. So, Andre, you want to? Yes, Madame Marusho and the Ombudsman. You mind if you can accompany them to cut the ribbon and formally open the exhibition?